I recall, I think it was Allen Ginsberg actually who talked about, just as you mentioned, how it was developed in Sandoz laboratories, Basel, Switzerland, and how it was something with the number of doses that was ordered, and claimed that there was a digit ended up wrong. So instead of ordering 50 doses, they ordered 500 million doses or something like that, and that.
There's a couple stories that have floated around for about I don't know 30 or 40 years about that. I think the genesis of that story was after the CIA became aware of the existence of LSD, and after they had done a few experiments, that it could be developed into a non-lethal weapon that perhaps could even win wars in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And so the decision was made early on to buy the entire stock of LSD that Sandoz Laboratories had produced. And at that point in time, the entire stock amounted to about 10,000 tablets or ampules of LSD. And a mistake was made in communications with Sandoz Labs from the CIA, and somebody miswrote 10,000 to read 100,000. But Sandoz quickly corrected the CIA and said, and informed them that they had nowhere near 100,000 doses, but that they would be able to produce them, but it would take 2 or 3 years. The reason the CIA wanted to buy everything that was available is because at the same time that they were researching LSD, the Russians were looking over their shoulder and shared their interest in LSD and were attempting to also buy LSD from Sandoz. But the CIA got Sandoz to commit not to sell to the Russians, and the Russians ended up developing the drug on their own in their own laboratories.
So there seems to be some truth to that story. But what I remember, what I wanted to ask as well is regarding what Allen Ginsberg said, that he had his own version of what happened, and then how the drug was what he called, I think, democratized or something like that. But to me, it seems like they intentionally disseminated some of these tablets on university campuses and so forth, and maybe in some way performed a kind of more covert experimentation on that level. Do you have any comments on that, Hank?
Yes, that's an excellent point. That's a very astute observation. They did do just exactly that. In the process, beginning about 1952, the CIA, besides working with Olson's laboratory, contracted with an additional about 146 colleges and universities across the United States, and one in Sweden. And that's the one in Sweden is explained in my book. I can't remember the name of the scientist in Sweden, but he was well ahead of a lot of the American scientists. But anyway, the CIA contracted with 147 colleges and universities across the country and supplied each one with a very healthy amount of LSD, maybe 200, 300 doses. Well, and at each college or university, a scientist with the institution was placed in charge of the test, and naturally they chose students as the test subjects. And again, you had humorous examples that came out of that, but you also had horrendous examples because, again, nobody at that point in time understood the powers of this drug, and early on, nobody even understood what amount should or shouldn't be taken.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's pretty much been decided in the last 10 or 15 years that a proper dosage, if you will, is between 100 and 150 micrograms of LSD. But at that point in time, it wasn't uncommon for students or test subjects to be given anywhere from 300 to 800. mics, and that's a tremendous amount of LSD, and that can go well beyond the normal trip, if you will, of 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah.
And eventually, it's interesting to note the CIA wasn't satisfied with the strength of LSD, and so they went a step further and developed what is commonly known as BZ, the letters BZ, and that's a drug that is best explained as LSD times 1,000. And in a subject, that induces an experience or a trip that can last anywhere from 4 days to 12 days. And it wasn't uncommon at all for people never to come back to normalcy from that experience. There's a film that was made in the United States that was distributed worldwide, I think maybe 15 or 20 years ago, called Jacob's Ladder.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and that I think the beginning of that film actually tries to recreate a BZ experience because that drug was sprayed against the Viet Cong a number of times during the Vietnam War. And at least during 1 or 2 instances, the winds changed and blew it back into the faces of U.S. troops with disastrous effects. And so if anybody wants to get a quick idea of what a BZ experience is like, I suggest they look at that film.
Oh, God, and that's not a pleasant film at all in that sense. Jeez.
It's a strange film, very, very frightening,
yes.
but quite realistic.
That's incredible. So what can you say about the military then and their relationship to LSD and all this? Do you think that they consider it to be a weapon of sorts in some way, or what was their kind of relationship with this drug?
Well, initially, the doctor, his name was F.Olson Green. He viewed LSD as an important drug because his concept was it could create nonviolent wars, that maybe wars could, as far-fetched as that sounds, maybe wars could be conducted through the use of biological agents that weren't lethal, that wouldn't kill people, but that would disable people temporarily or permanently. And the side that had the better drugs that they could place in aerosol form or deliver through other means would win the wars. Now, at the time, that appeared, according to all the documents I've seen, the U.S. military took that very, very seriously, and they thought that was a real possibility. I think within 10 years they moved well away from that, because if you in studying thousands of documents with the military, you see that initially they're looking at LSD as usable for fighting wars, small and large, and then 10 or 15 years later, they're looking at LSD as an appropriate tool in interrogations. And the interrogation setting and the covert setting is pretty much where LSD ended up with the military. LSD is still used by the military today in interrogation settings. It's been reported to have been used at a Guantanamo base, at the Guantanamo prison, for so-called detainees in Cuba, and it's been used domestically in this country on other detainees in interrogation settings. I don't think people shouldn't think that it's used as a truth drug, because it's not a truth drug because of its unpredictable nature. But I think its main intent is to basically scare the hell out of anyone that it's given to, and frighten them to the point where they will talk and plead for normalcy.
See, some of these ideas or concepts that you mentioned before and what the military discussed or theorized